Dr. Sarah Chen adjusted her lab goggles and wiped sweat from her forehead. The makeshift laboratory aboard the trade station orbiting Kepler 442b buzzed with activity as humans and aliens conducted business. Sarah had been working here for 6 months, fixing broken equipment and solving technical problems that stumped even the most advanced alien civilizations. The Vorthok were known throughout the galaxy as master engineers. Their crystalline structures and mathematical precision made them excellent builders. But they had one weakness that puzzled every species they encountered. They could not create technology that helped the disabled. Their society believed that physical limitations were spiritual tests, and helping someone overcome them went against divine will. Sarah learned this the hard way when she met Zira. The young Vorthak female had been born without the light-sensitive organs that allowed her species to see. While other Vorthak possessed clusters of crystal formations around their heads that detected electromagnetic radiation, Zira's head remained smooth and dark. She navigated the station using sound and touch, her 4 arms feeling along walls and railings. Sarah first encountered Zira in the station's main corridor. The alien girl had become confused by construction noise that masked her usual audio landmarks. She stood frozen in the middle of the busy walkway, while other beings flowed around her like water around a stone. "Hey there," Sarah said gently, approaching slowly. "You seem lost. Can I help?" Zira's head turned toward Sarah's voice. The translator device embedded in Sarah's collar converted her words into the musical tones of the Vorthak language. "I seek the nutrition dispensary," Zira replied, her voice carrying harmonics that made it sound like wind chimes. "But the construction sounds confuse my navigation." Sarah looked around and spotted the food court about 50 meters away. "I'm heading that direction myself. Mind if I walk with you?" "That would be appreciated," Zira said. As they walked, Sarah observed how Zira moved. The alien girl's steps were careful and deliberate. Her lower arms swept the ground ahead, while her upper arms felt for obstacles at chest height. It was an elegant solution, but Sarah's engineer mind immediately began thinking of improvements. "I am Zira of the 3rd Crystal Formation," the alien said as they walked. "Sarah Chen, human engineer. I work in the repair bay. Human." Zira repeated thoughtfully. "I have heard of your species. You are the ones who build impossible things." Sarah laughed. "We just approach problems differently than most species. What seems impossible to one mind might be simple to another." They reached the food court, and Sarah helped Zira orient herself to the layout. As they parted ways, Sarah couldn't stop thinking about the young Vorthok situation. That evening, Sarah researched Vorthok physiology and culture in the station's database. What she learned disturbed her. The Vorthak believed that disabilities were tests sent by their deity, called the Prime Crystal. Helping someone overcome these challenges was considered interference with divine will. Those born with limitations were expected to accept them as spiritual lessons. Sarah thought this was completely backward. In human culture, helping others overcome challenges was considered one of the highest virtues. The idea of leaving someone to struggle when you had the ability to help felt wrong on every level. Over the next few weeks, Sarah encountered Zira several more times. Each meeting reinforced Sarah's desire to help. She watched Zira navigate the station's complex layout, using only sound and touch. The young Vorthak had developed remarkable skills, but Sarah could see how much effort every simple task required. During one conversation, Zira mentioned her dream of becoming a star mapper like her parents. The Vorthak were famous for their ability to navigate between star systems using their precise electromagnetic senses. But without sight, Zira could never join the Navigators Guild. "The Prime Crystal has given me this limitation to teach patience," Zira explained when Sarah asked about her dreams. "I must accept what cannot be changed." Sarah bit her tongue to keep from arguing. In her culture, very little was truly unchangeable. That night, Sarah began working on a secret project in her private workshop. She started with basic human visor technology used by pilots and engineers. The challenge was adapting it to Vorthak physiology and needs. Vorthak heads were larger than human heads, with a more angular structure. Their missing light sensors should have been located in 6 positions around their skulls. Sarah needed to create a device that could detect electromagnetic radiation across multiple spectrums and convert it into signals the Vorthok brain could process. The work consumed her free time for weeks. Sarah studied Vorthak, neural patterns, and brain structure. She learned that their visual processing centers were still present, just unstimulated. If she could find a way to send the right signals to those areas, Zira might be able to see. The breakthrough came when Sarah realized she was thinking too much like a human. Human visual aids tried to recreate human sight. But Vorthak's sight was different. They saw electromagnetic fields, heat signatures, and energy patterns that were invisible to human eyes. Sarah needed to build a device that worked the way Vorthak eyes should work. She incorporated sensors that could detect power sources, magnetic fields, and energy emissions. The visor would translate these into patterns that could be transmitted directly to Zira's brain through harmless electromagnetic pulses. Building the device required materials from a dozen different species. Sarah traded favors and repairs for rare metals and crystals. She worked late into the station's night cycles, fine-tuning circuits and calibrating sensors. The hardest part was keeping the project secret. If the Vorthak authorities discovered what Sarah was building, they might ban her from the station. Worse, they might punish Zira for accepting help with her spiritual test. After 2 months of work, Sarah had a working prototype. The visor looked like a combination of human tech and alien crystal work. 6 sensor arrays positioned around a lightweight frame would rest against Zira's head, where her natural light organs should have been. Thin wires would make contact with specific nerve clusters to transmit the visual data. Sarah tested the device extensively using computer simulations. The readings looked promising, but there was no way to know if it would actually work without trying it on a real Vorthak. She arranged to meet Zira in a quiet section of the station's observation deck. The area offered a good view of the planet below and the star field beyond, perfect for testing the visor's range of capabilities. "I have something to show you," Sarah said when Zira arrived. "But I need you to promise you'll listen to my full explanation before making any decisions." Zira tilted her head curiously. What manner of thing requires such promises? Sarah took a deep breath and pulled out the visor. "I've built something that might let you see." The silence stretched for long seconds. When Zira spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. "Sarah, what you suggest is forbidden. The prime crystal gave me this limitation for a reason." "What if the reason was to bring us together?" Sarah asked. "What if your limitation existed so that I could learn something by helping you overcome it? Maybe we're both being tested." It was a risky argument, using Vorthak religious concepts to justify her actions. But Sarah had studied their beliefs extensively while building the visor. Zira remained quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Show me this device you have made." Sarah explained how the visor worked, describing each component and its function. She told Zira about the weeks of research and the careful adaptation to Vorthak physiology. "It won't hurt you," Sarah promised. "The worst that could happen is it doesn't work. But if it does work, if it works, I will see the stars my parents map." Zira finished quietly. "Will you try it?" Another long pause. Then Zira nodded slowly. "If the prime crystal disapproves, surely the device will not function. But if it works, perhaps that too is part of the divine plan." Sarah's hands shook slightly as she helped position the visor on Zira's head. The device was lighter than it looked, and the crystal components Sarah had incorporated made it feel natural against Vorthok's skin. "I'm activating the power source," Sarah said. "You might feel a slight tingling as the neural interfaces make contact." Zira stood perfectly still as Sarah brought the systems online. The sensor arrays began glowing softly as they started detecting electromagnetic signals. Sarah watched the readouts on her handheld monitor, making minor adjustments to optimize the signal processing. "The tingling has stopped," Zira reported. "I feel something strange, like pressure behind my thoughts." "That's the visual processing centers in your brain activating," Sarah explained. "They're trying to make sense of new signals." It might take a moment for patterns to emerge. Sarah held her breath as she watched Zira's body language change. The young Vorthok's head turned slightly, then more deliberately. Her forearms, usually in constant motion feeling for obstacles, hung still at her sides. "Sarah," Zira whispered. "I see light. What does it look like?" "Everything glows," Zira said, her voice full of wonder. "The walls, the floor, even you. There are patterns of energy everywhere. The lights in the ceiling burn like small suns. And beyond the window," Zira moved toward the observation port, her movements suddenly confident and direct. She pressed her face close to the transparent aluminum. "The stars," she breathed. "They are not just points of light. They have colors, patterns. I can see the energy flowing between them. And the planet below. It pulses with life energy like a great heartbeat." Sarah felt tears in her eyes as she watched Zira experience sight for the first time. This was why humans built impossible things. Not for glory or profit, but for moments like this. They spent the next hour with Zira exploring her new vision. She could see electromagnetic fields that were invisible to humans, detecting power conduits inside the walls and energy signatures of different alien species. The visor was working even better than Sarah had hoped. "This changes everything," Zira said as they prepared to leave. "I could become a navigator now. I could map star systems and plot courses between worlds." "Be careful who you tell," Sarah warned. "Not everyone will see this as a gift. Some might view it as interference with divine will. Then we must convince them otherwise," Zira said with new confidence. If the prime crystal disapproved, surely this miracle would not have been possible. As they parted ways, Sarah felt proud of what they had accomplished. She had given sight to someone who had never seen the stars. It was the kind of breakthrough that made all her years of study and work worthwhile. But Sarah had no idea that their success would soon create problems neither of them could have imagined. Word of the miraculous visor would spread quickly through the station's alien communities. Some would see it as a wonderful gift, while others would view it as a dangerous violation of natural order. Within days, the simple act of helping one young alien see would divide the station into opposing factions and threaten to tear apart centuries of interspecies cooperation. The universe was about to learn that when humans decided to help, the consequences could be both wonderful and terrible, in ways no one could predict. The news spread through the station like wildfire. Within 3 days of Zira first wearing the visor, every alien community aboard the massive orbital facility had heard about the human engineer who had given sight to a blind Vorthok. The reactions varied dramatically depending on which species was discussing it. The Terran merchants were proud of Sarah's achievement. They saw it as another example of human ingenuity and compassion. The story confirmed what humans had always believed, that no problem was truly unsolvable if you approached it with enough creativity and determination. The Zephyrian traders found the whole situation fascinating from a purely technical standpoint. Their species valued innovation above all else, and they wanted to study Sarah's visor design. Several Zephyrian engineers had already approached her with offers to purchase the technology. But among the Vorthak community, the reaction was far more complex and troubling. High crystallographer Morix arrived on the station just 4 days after word of the visor reached the Vorthok homeworld. He was a massive example of his species, with crystal formations covering most of his head and shoulders that marked him as one of the most spiritually advanced Vorthok alive. His presence meant the situation had escalated to the highest levels of their government. Sarah first learned of his arrival when security forces surrounded her workshop. The station commander, a practical Centauran named Vex, personally escorted her to the main conference room, where Morix waited with a delegation of Vorthok officials. "Dr. Chen," Commander Vex said as they walked, "this has become a diplomatic situation. The Vorthak are claiming you've committed a religious crime by interfering with divine will. They're demanding your arrest and the confiscation of your device." Sarah's heart sank. She had known there might be pushback, but she hadn't expected it to reach this level so quickly. The conference room was filled with tension when they arrived. High crystallographer Morix dominated one side of the table, his crystalline formations catching and reflecting the room's lights in complex patterns. Around him sat other high-ranking Vorthok, their faces set in expressions of disapproval. On the other side of the table sat Zira. Sarah was surprised to see the young Vorthak there, wearing the visor and looking more confident than Sarah had ever seen her. Her posture was straight, her head held high, and her movements were precise and purposeful. "Dr. Chen," Morix began, his voice carrying the harmonic undertones of high authority, "you stand accused of committing sacrilege against the Prime Crystal. You have interfered with a divine test, corrupting one of our people with false sight." "With respect," Sarah replied, "I helped someone who wanted to see. Where I come from, that's considered an act of compassion, not sacrilege. Your human concepts of compassion are irrelevant," another Vorthak official interjected. "The Prime Crystal assigns each being their proper limitations. To circumvent these limitations is to reject divine wisdom." Zira stood up, her movements smooth and confident thanks to her new sight. "High Crystallographer." Morix's crystal formations dimmed slightly, a sign of displeasure. "You may speak, but understand that your judgment has been compromised by this false sight. The device you wear feeds lies to your mind." "These are not lies," Zira said firmly. "Through this device, I can see the energy patterns that flow through all things. I can perceive the electromagnetic signatures that define our universe. If anything, I see more clearly than I ever have before." "Blasphemy," whispered one of the other officials, but Zira continued. "I have spent my life accepting that I could not see, believing it was the Prime Crystal's will. But what if the Prime Crystal's will was for me to find someone who could help me see? What if Sarah's presence here, her knowledge and compassion, were all part of the divine plan?" Sarah watched the exchange with growing concern. Zira was taking enormous risks by challenging the religious authorities so directly. High Crystallographer Morix studied Zira for a long moment. "Remove the device," he commanded. "Submit to proper spiritual counseling. We will help you understand how you have been deceived." "I will not," Zira replied calmly. The silence that followed was deafening. No one had expected such direct defiance. "Then you force our hand," Morix said sadly. "By the authority of the Prime Crystal Council, I hereby declare you spiritually contaminated. You are cast out from Vorthak society until you submit to purification." Sarah felt sick. In trying to help Zira, she had inadvertently caused the young alien to be exiled from her own people. But Zira's response surprised everyone. "If seeing the universe as it truly is makes me contaminated in your eyes, then perhaps contamination is preferable to blindness." Commander Vex stepped forward before the situation could escalate further. "High Crystallographer, while I respect your religious concerns, this station operates under interspecies law. Dr. Chen has committed no crime according to our regulations, and Zira is free to make her own choices about medical devices, regardless of her species' religious beliefs." "This is not a medical device," Morix argued. "This is a corruption of natural order. And if you refuse to act, the Vorthak Confederation will consider this station hostile to our interests." The threat was clear. The Vorthak controlled several major trade routes, and their economic pressure could force the station to close. Sarah realized she had to speak up. "High Crystallographer, may I ask you a question?" Morix turned his imposing gaze toward her. "Speak. In your religion, who or what created the Prime Crystal?" "The Prime Crystal is eternal and self-creating," Morix replied, clearly puzzled by the question. "And who created the laws of physics that govern how electromagnetic energy behaves?" The Prime Crystal established all natural laws," Morix said, though his voice carried a note of uncertainty. Sarah pressed her advantage. "Then, the knowledge I used to build this visor, the physical principles that make it work, the materials that compose it, all of these came from the same source as Zira's limitation. If the prime crystal created both the problem and the solution, perhaps both are part of the same divine plan. Several of the Vorthok officials exchanged glances. Sarah's argument was using their own theology against them. Furthermore, Sarah continued, humans believe that our ability to help others is one of our most sacred traits. If I ignored Zira's situation when I had the ability to help, wouldn't that be rejecting my own divine purpose? High crystallographer Morix was quiet for a long time, his crystal formations shifting colors as he processed Sarah's words. Finally, he said, "Your words are thought-provoking, but they do not change the fundamental violation that has occurred. Then let us find a compromise," Commander Vex suggested. Dr. Chen, would you be willing to share your visor technology with Vorthak scientists? Let them study it and determine whether it aligns with their religious principles. Of course, Sarah agreed immediately, but Morix shook his head. The contamination has already occurred. The device must be destroyed, and the corrupted one must be purified. No, Zira said firmly. I will not give up my sight, and I will not submit to your purification. The standoff stretched for several tense moments. Then, an unexpected voice spoke from the corner of the room. Perhaps there is another way to resolve this. Everyone turned to see Elder Kresh, an ancient Vorthak who served as the station's spiritual advisor. Sarah had barely noticed him when she entered the room, but now he stepped forward with slow, deliberate movements. Elder Kresh, Morix said respectfully, we did not expect you to involve yourself in this matter. The spiritual implications affect all beings on this station, Kresh replied. His crystal formations were smaller than Morix's, but carried a different quality of light that suggested great age and wisdom. I have observed the young one since she began wearing the device. Her behavior shows no signs of corruption or deception. But she defies the natural order, one of the officials protested. Does she? Kresh asked. Or does she embrace a broader understanding of the divine plan? Consider this. The human Sarah was brought to this station by circumstances beyond anyone's control. Her knowledge and compassion were shaped by her own species' divine purpose. Zira's limitation created the opportunity for their paths to cross. Is it not possible that all of these elements were orchestrated by the prime crystal itself? Morix frowned. You suggest that the prime crystal intended for a human to interfere with one of our spiritual tests? I suggest that perhaps the test was never about Zira accepting blindness, Kresh said quietly. Perhaps the test was about whether we could recognize divine intervention when it came from an unexpected source. The room fell silent as the implications of Elder Kresh's words sank in. He was suggesting that Sarah's visor might actually be part of the divine plan, rather than a violation of it. This is a complex theological question, Morix admitted. It requires careful study and meditation. Then study it, Commander Vex said. But while you're studying, Zira keeps her visor, and Sarah continues her work. No one gets exiled or arrested based on theoretical theological debates. Sarah watched the negotiations continue for another hour. Eventually, they reached a temporary agreement. The Vorthak delegation would remain on the station to study the visor technology and its theological implications. Zira would be allowed to keep her sight while the investigation continued. Sarah would cooperate fully with their research. But as the meeting broke up, Sarah noticed the worried glances between some of the Vorthok officials. This compromise might have diffused the immediate crisis, but it hadn't resolved the fundamental conflict between different views of divine will and technological intervention. Over the following days, Sarah learned just how deep the division ran within Vorthak society. Messages flooded the station's communication networks as news of the visor spread to other Vorthak communities throughout the galaxy. Some supported Elder Kresh's interpretation, seeing the device as a potential gift from the prime crystal. Others denounced it as dangerous heresy that threatened the foundations of their faith. The debate wasn't limited to the Vorthok. Other religious species began taking sides based on their own theological perspectives. The Altarian monks supported Sarah's actions, believing that helping others overcome limitations was always virtuous. The sacred orders of Regal condemned the visor as an affront to divine will. Sarah found herself at the center of a galaxy-wide religious controversy. Every day brought new delegations wanting to study the visor, debate its implications, or try to shut down her research. The simple act of helping one young alien see had somehow triggered a philosophical war about the nature of divine will and technological intervention. But the most troubling development came when radical factions on both sides began taking more extreme actions. Ultra-Orthodox Vorthak started organizing boycotts of any station or facility that allowed divine interference technology. Meanwhile, pro-technology groups began funding research into similar devices for other disabled aliens, regardless of their species' religious objections. Sarah realized that her innocent act of compassion had unleashed forces far beyond her control. The visor had become a symbol in a much larger conflict about faith, technology, and the right to help others. As she watched the protests and counter-protests outside her workshop, Sarah wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. But then she would see Zira, confident and happy as she used her new sight to explore the universe. And Sarah knew she couldn't regret giving someone the chance to see the stars. The real question was whether the galaxy could find a way to resolve this conflict before it tore apart the delicate alliances that kept thousands of species working together in peace. 3 weeks after the theological summit began, the situation had deteriorated beyond anyone's worst fears. What started as a debate about one visor had exploded into a galaxy-spanning conflict that threatened to destroy centuries of interspecies cooperation. Sarah stood in her workshop, surrounded by broken equipment and scattered research notes. Extremist groups from both sides had ransacked the lab twice in the past week. The pro-technology faction wanted to steal her designs to mass-produce visors for disabled aliens across the galaxy. The Orthodox Religious Coalition wanted to destroy everything she had built to prevent further contamination. Commander Vex had assigned security guards to protect Sarah and her work, but even they seemed nervous about the escalating tensions. The station's corridors buzzed with angry debates between representatives from dozens of species, each convinced that their interpretation of divine will was the only correct one. The worst part was watching how the conflict was affecting Zira. The young Vorthak had become a symbol for both sides, and the constant attention was taking its toll. Religious protesters followed her everywhere, some praising her as a miracle, others condemning her as corrupted. Death threats arrived daily from extremist groups who saw her as either a saint or a heretic. Sarah found Zira in their usual meeting spot on the observation deck, staring out at the stars with her visor-enhanced vision. But instead of the wonder and joy Sarah had seen in those first days, Zira's posture spoke of exhaustion and doubt. "I've been thinking about what you said that first day," Zira said without turning around. "About how humans build impossible things. But I'm beginning to wonder if some things shouldn't be built at all." Sarah joined her at the window. "Having regrets?" Saying 2-9. "Having regrets? Not about seeing," Zira said quickly. "Never about that. But about everything else. The protests, the violence, the way families are being torn apart over theological debates. Did we cause all this just so I could see the stars?" Before Sarah could answer, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Emergency lights flashed as Commander Vex's voice echoed through the speakers. "All personnel report to designated safety areas immediately. We have multiple ships approaching on attack vectors. This is not a drill." Sarah and Zira rushed to the nearest observation port and saw a sight that made Sarah's blood run cold. A massive fleet of ships from different species was converging on the station from multiple directions. The religious coalition that opposed the visor had apparently decided that negotiation wasn't working fast enough. "They mean to destroy the station," Zira whispered, her enhanced vision picking up details that Sarah's eyes missed. "I can see the energy signatures building in their weapon systems." Commander Vex's voice crackled over the intercom again. "This is Commander Vex, to the approaching fleets. You are in violation of interspecies law. Stand down immediately." The response came from High Admiral Thorne of the Sacred Orders of Regal, his voice cold with religious fervor. "Commander Vex, your station harbors technology that corrupts the divine order. Surrender the heretical device and its creators, or face purification by fire. Sarah felt sick. Her simple act of kindness had escalated into an armed conflict that could kill thousands of innocent beings. She thought about all the families on the station, all the children who had nothing to do with theological debates about divine will and technological intervention. "I have to stop this," Sarah said, turning toward the communication center. "How?" Zira asked. "The time for words has passed. They've convinced themselves that violence serves their god." Sarah paused. Zira was right that words alone wouldn't work. But maybe there was another way. "The visor," Sarah said suddenly. "It's become a symbol for both sides, right? What if we used that symbolism to force them to confront what they're really fighting about?" "I don't understand." Sarah's mind was racing now, formulating a plan that was either brilliant or completely insane. "We're going to broadcast a demonstration to every ship in that fleet. We're going to show them exactly what the visor does and what it means. And then, we're going to let them decide whether it's worth killing thousands of people over." They raced through the station's corridors toward the main communications center. The hallways were filled with panicked civilians and security personnel preparing for battle. Sarah's security escort tried to stop her from entering a restricted area, but Commander Vex overruled them. "Whatever you're planning, make it fast," the Centauron commander said. "My defensive systems can hold them off for maybe 20 minutes before they overwhelm our shields." Sarah quickly connected her personal equipment to the station's most powerful communication array. She set up a visual link that would broadcast directly to every ship in the attacking fleet, as well as to monitoring stations throughout the galaxy. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen, aboard Trade Station Kepler 442, she said as the connection went live. "I understand you've come here to destroy the device I created. Before you do that, I want to show you exactly what you're trying to destroy." Sarah gestured for Zira to join her in front of the camera. The young Vorthak moved confidently into the frame, her visor gleaming under the studio lights. "This is Zira," Sarah continued. "She was born blind. Your religious authorities say this was a test from their deity, and that helping her overcome it was a violation of divine will. I want to show you what that violation actually looks like." Sarah had prepared a special program for the visor that would broadcast Zira's enhanced vision directly to the fleet. As the program activated, every screen in the attacking ships would show exactly what Zira could see through her artificial eyes. The demonstration began with a view of the station itself. Through Zira's visor, the massive structure wasn't just a collection of metal and plastic. It pulsed with the energy signatures of thousands of living beings, each one a unique pattern of electromagnetic activity that represented a thinking, feeling consciousness. "This is what Zira sees when she looks at your ships," Sarah narrated. "Not weapons of war, but vessels filled with living beings. Each energy signature represents someone's parent, child, or friend." The image shifted to show the planet below. Through normal eyes, it appeared as a blue-green sphere with swirling clouds, but through Zira's enhanced vision, it revealed itself as a complex web of life energy, with flowing currents of biological activity that connected every living thing into a vast, interconnected network. "Your religious leaders say that Zira's blindness was a test from their deity," Sarah continued. "But what if the test was actually meant for all of us? What if the real question isn't whether she should be able to see, but whether we can see what she sees? We have sun data." Sarah activated another program that showed the energy patterns flowing between the attacking ships. The electromagnetic communications, the power transfers, the synchronized movements all appeared as streams of light connecting the vessels into a single, coordinated entity. "You've come here to destroy something you call a violation of divine will," Sarah said. "But look at what you're really destroying. You're not just attacking a piece of technology. You're attacking the idea that different species can work together to help each other overcome limitations." The demonstration moved to show other areas of the station. Alien children playing together in the education center, their different energy signatures, mixing and interacting in patterns of pure joy. Medical facilities where doctors from a dozen species work together to heal the sick and injured. Research labs where scientists shared knowledge to solve problems that no single species could handle alone. This station exists because different species chose to help each other instead of staying isolated in their own limited perspectives, Sarah continued. Every medical advance, every technological breakthrough, every moment of cooperation between different peoples happens because someone chose to help rather than to judge. Through Zira's visor, even the attacking fleet looked different. The individual ships might carry different weapons and different flags, but their energy signatures revealed the same basic patterns of fear, anger, and confused devotion that existed in every thinking being. You say I violated divine will by helping Zira see? Sarah said. But what if divine will is actually expressed through compassion? What if helping others overcome their limitations is exactly what we're supposed to do? Sarah paused the demonstration and looked directly into the camera. I'm not going to debate theology with you. That's not my place, as a human or as an engineer. But I will say this. If your God demands that you kill thousands of innocent people to stop one act of kindness, then maybe you need to reconsider what your God really wants. The communication channel remained open, but the response wasn't what Sarah expected. Instead of angry religious rhetoric or military threats, there was only silence. Commander Vex checked his tactical displays and reported quietly. The fleet has stopped advancing. Their weapons are powering down. On the visual feed, Sarah could see confusion spreading through the attacking ships. The energy patterns Zira's visor detected showed internal conflicts as crews struggled with what they had just witnessed. Finally, a new voice came over the communication channel. It was Elder Kresh, speaking from one of the Vorthak vessels. High Admiral Thorn, Kresh said, his ancient voice carrying absolute authority. I have seen what the human's device truly reveals. This is not a corruption of divine sight. This is divine sight itself, showing us the connections between all living things that we have been too blind to see. Elder Kresh, Admiral Thorn responded, his voice uncertain. The device violates natural order. The device reveals natural order. Kresh corrected. It shows us that all consciousness is connected, that helping others overcome their limitations strengthens the entire web of existence. If this is not divine will, then I have spent my entire life misunderstanding the nature of creation. The silence that followed lasted for several long minutes. Sarah watched the tactical displays as the attacking fleet slowly began to disperse. Ships that had arrived ready for holy war were now pulling back, their crews struggling to reconcile what they had seen with their previous beliefs. High Admiral Thorn was the last to speak. Elder Kresh, if you are correct about the divine nature of this technology, then we have come close to committing a great sin. We have all learned something today, Kresh replied. Perhaps that was the real test all along. Over the next few days, Sarah watched as news of the demonstration spread throughout the galaxy. The images from Zira's visor, showing the interconnected nature of all consciousness, sparked a revolution in how many species understood their relationship with the divine. Some religious groups still opposed the technology, but they could no longer claim universal moral authority. Too many people had seen the beauty of existence through Zira's enhanced vision to accept that such sight was somehow evil. More importantly, the demonstration had revealed something deeper about the nature of cooperation and compassion. When different species worked together, they could accomplish things that none of them could achieve alone. The visor itself was proof of this, combining human engineering with Vorthak physiology and materials from dozens of different worlds. Sarah found Zira in their usual spot on the observation deck, watching the last of the former attack fleet disappear into hyperspace. The young Vorthak seemed more at peace than she had been in weeks. Do you still regret that I built the visor? Sarah asked. Zira was quiet for a moment. her artificial eyes tracking the energy flows between distant stars. I regret that it took a crisis to make people see what was always true. But I'm grateful that they can see it now. What will you do next? I've been accepted into the Navigators Guild, Zira said with quiet pride. My enhanced vision actually gives me advantages in mapping energy currents between star systems. I'll be charting new trade routes and exploring uncharted sectors. Sarah smiled. And the religious controversy? Elder Kresh is working with theologians from a dozen species to develop new interpretations of divine will that embrace technological assistance rather than forbidding it. It will take time, but the conversation has changed. People are asking different questions now. And, as they watched the stars, Sarah reflected on everything that had happened. A simple act of kindness had nearly started a war, but it had ultimately led to a deeper understanding of cooperation and divine purpose. The human drive to help others had collided with alien religious beliefs and somehow created something new and better. You know what the strangest part is? Sarah said. I just wanted to help one person see. I never intended to change how an entire galaxy thinks about divine will and technological intervention. Zira laughed, a sound like crystal bells chiming in harmony. Perhaps that's the most human thing of all. You build impossible things not because you want to change the universe, but because you can't stand to see someone struggle when you have the ability to help. Is that such a bad thing? It's the most beautiful thing imaginable, Zira replied. And I think that's exactly what the Prime Crystal intended when it brought us together. Sarah looked out at the vast expanse of stars, each one representing countless worlds and countless opportunities to help others overcome their limitations. The universe was full of impossible problems, waiting for someone crazy enough to solve them. For a human engineer, that sounded like paradise. The visor had given Zira the ability to see the stars. But in return, Zira had helped an entire galaxy see something much more important. That compassion and cooperation were not violations of divine will, but expressions of it. And that lesson would outlive any technology, no matter how impossible it might seem.